The ocean was silent, not peaceful, but waiting, as if it understood what was about to happen and chose not to interfere. On the morning of June 4th, 1942, the Pacific stretched endlessly beneath the rising sun, its surface calm in a way that felt almost unnatural. To the men aboard the ships scattered across that vast expanse of water, there was nothing to see that hinted at history in the making. No smoke on the horizon, no distant thunder of guns, only wind, waves, and the low hum of engines. No one standing on the flight decks, no pilot tightening his straps inside a thin metal cockpit, no admiral staring at a map truly understood what the next few hours would bring. By nightfall, the balance of World War II would be shattered. No armies would clash, no tanks would roll, no beaches would be stormed. Instead, the fate of the war would be decided by men who never saw their enemy face to face, by radio messages that arrived minutes too late, by fuel gauges creeping steadily toward empty, and by decisions made under unbearable pressure that could never be undone. This was the Battle of Midway, and this was the moment the war turned. Welcome to the Historia Unlocked. Among the countless battles of the Second World War, Midway stands apart not because it was the largest or the most destructive, but because it was the most decisive. It was a battle balanced on a razor's edge where victory and defeat were separated by chance, timing, and human judgment. Had events unfolded slightly differently, had one report arrived sooner or one decision been made faster, the Pacific War could have followed a radically different path. Midway was a battle where information defeated numbers, where instinct overpowered doctrine, and where hesitation proved more lethal than bombs or torpedoes ever could. In the months following the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941, Japan's expansion across the Pacific seemed unstoppable. The Imperial Japanese Navy struck with speed and precision, rolling through Southeast Asia as if no force could stand against it. Hong Kong fell. Singapore, the so-called Gibraltar of the East, surrendered in humiliation. The Philippines burned as American and Filipino forces were pushed into retreat. On the surface, Japan appeared to be at the height of its power, a naval empire whose reach stretched across half the globe. Yet behind the confident headlines and victory parades lay a growing sense of dread among Japan's leadership. The Philippines burned as American and Filipino forces were pushed into retreat. On the surface, Japan appeared to be at the height of its power, a naval empire whose reach stretched across half the globe. Yet behind the confident headlines and victory parades lay a growing sense of dread among Japan's leadership. They knew what the world did not yet see. Japan could win battles, but it could not win a war of production. The United States was not yet fully awake, but when it was, its factories would dwarf anything Japan could muster. American shipyards would launch carriers faster than Japan could replace them. American training programs would produce pilots in numbers Japan could never sustain. Time was America's greatest weapon, and every month that passed tipped the scales further out of Japan's favor. The window for victory was closing, and Japan needed one decisive blow to force the United States to the negotiating table. That urgency gave birth to a desperate solution, and its name was Midway. Midway Atoll was small, insignificant at a glance, just two low coral islands surrounded by open ocean thousands of miles from anywhere that mattered. But in strategic terms, it was priceless. Sitting nearly halfway between Japan and the American mainland, Midway functioned as a forward American outpost and an unsinkable aircraft carrier. From Midway, American bombers could threaten Japan's defensive perimeter and even its home islands. If Japan destroyed Midway, it would push the United States farther east, stretch American supply lines, and buy Japan time it desperately needed. Even more importantly, Midway could serve as bait, a lure designed to draw America's aircraft carriers into a trap. The man who conceived the plan was Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the combined fleet and the architect of the Pearl Harbor attack. Yamamoto was not blinded by overconfidence. He was a realist, perhaps the most dangerous kind of strategist. He had lived in the United States, studied its culture, and understood its industrial might. He openly warned Japan's leadership that war with America could only end badly unless it was decided quickly. His solution was brutal in its simplicity: destroy America's aircraft carriers in a single decisive battle or accept eventual defeat. Yamamoto's plan relied on deception, distance, and flawless execution. A diversionary strike would target the Aleutian Islands near Alaska, drawing American attention north and splitting their already limited forces. Meanwhile, Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo would lead Japan's elite carrier force, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, straight toward Midway. The island would be bombed into submission, Japanese troops would land and occupy it, and when American carriers inevitably rushed in to respond, Yamamoto's fleet would be waiting to annihilate them. Everything depended on surprise. Without it, the plan collapsed. What Yamamoto did not know was that the surprise was already gone. Far from the open ocean, deep beneath Pearl Harbor, another battle was being fought in silence. In cramped, overheated rooms filled with intercepted radio traffic, chalkboards, and endless cigarette smoke, Commander Joseph Rockefort and his cryptanalysis team were piecing together fragments of Japanese naval communications. The work was exhausting and uncertain, but patterns began to emerge. Again and again, one designation appeared in Japanese messages. AF. Rockefort suspected AF referred to Midway, but suspicion alone could not justify risking the Pacific Fleet. To be certain, he devised a simple but brilliant test. Midway sent an unencrypted message claiming its freshwater distillation system had failed and that it was running dangerously low on water. Shortly afterward, Japanese radio traffic reported that AF was suffering from a water shortage. There was no longer any doubt. Midway was the target. Armed with this knowledge, Admiral Chester Nimitz now faced a gamble of his own. On paper, the situation looked grim. Japan had more carriers, more experienced pilots, and the momentum of victory. The United States had only 3 operational carriers. Enterprise and Hornet were intact, but Yorktown had been heavily damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea and was barely seaworthy. In a staggering display of effort, American dockworkers repaired her just enough to sail in only 3 days. She was a gamble within a gamble. But Nimitz possessed something Japan did not. He knew where the enemy would be and roughly when they would arrive. Rather than defending Midway directly, he chose to ambush. He positioned his carriers northeast of the island, hidden beyond the horizon, radio silence enforced, waiting for Nagumo to sail into range. When Japan struck the Aleutian Islands on June 3rd, Nimitz did not move. He refused to take the bait. The trap remained set. Before dawn on June 4th, American patrol aircraft lifted off into the darkness to search the vast Pacific. The ocean was enormous, visibility was poor, and fog clung low to the water. Hours passed with nothing but empty sea. Then, through the haze, Ensign Jack Reed spotted enemy ships. The report crackled through the radio. The first contact had been made. The war was no longer theoretical. It was happening. American bombers attacked immediately, achieving little damage, but the silence was broken and the clock began to run. At first light, Nagumo launched his strike. Over 100 Japanese aircraft surged toward Midway, their pilots veterans of Pearl Harbor and the early months of conquest. From their cockpits, Midway rose from the sea as anti-aircraft fire clawed upward. On the ground, American defenders scrambled as fighters rose to meet the attack. Many never returned, but they bought precious time. The airfield was battered, planes burned, runways cratered, but Midway was not neutralized. That single fact changed everything. Nagumo now faced the most important decision of his career under crushing psychological pressure. Reports indicated that Midway remained operational and required another strike. At the same time, scattered reports suggested enemy aircraft in areas where none should exist. Nagumo was trapped between doctrine and uncertainty. Japanese carrier doctrine demanded perfect coordination and discouraged partial strikes, and disobeying Yamamoto or acting rashly could mean disgrace or removal. Nagumo was a battleship officer by training, not an aviator, and he felt the weight of every life under his command. He ordered his reserve aircraft to be rearmed for another attack on Midway. Then a delayed scout report arrived. Enemy ships had been sighted, possibly carriers. The order was reversed. On the flight decks below, chaos erupted. Bombs were rolled away, torpedoes dragged back, fuel hoses crisscrossed the decks, and aircraft sat armed, fueled, and dangerously exposed. The carriers were at their most vulnerable, but Nagumo hesitated, waiting for clarity that would never come. Every minute that passed tightened the noose. Below, American torpedo bombers attacked in wave after wave. From the cockpit of a slow and outdated TBD Devastator, An American pilot watched Japanese carriers grow larger through smoke and flak. He knew the odds were hopeless. He pressed on anyway. One by one, the torpedo planes were cut down by Zero fighters and anti-aircraft fire. Most crews never returned. Their sacrifice seemed pointless, even tragic. But it was not in vain. Their attacks dragged Japanese fighters down to sea level, scattered defensive formations, and cleared the skies above without anyone realizing it at the moment. High overhead, American dive bombers searched desperately. Fuel was running low, nerves were fraying, and the ocean stretched endlessly beneath them. Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey faced a choice: turn back and save his men, or gamble everything on instinct. He spotted a lone Japanese destroyer racing north and made his decision. He followed it. At 10:22 a.m., the clouds broke. Below lay the Japanese carriers, their decks crowded with aircraft, fuel lines still connected, crews caught completely off guard. For the pilots above, time seemed to slow. Then gravity took over. American dive bombers fell from the sun. In minutes, Kaga burned, Soryu exploded, and Akagi, Nagumo's flagship, was mortally wounded. Fires raced across flight decks as fueled aircraft detonated in chain reactions. The most powerful carrier force on Earth was crippled in 5 minutes. Only Hiryu remained. She struck back hard, launching counterattacks that crippled Yorktown, and for a brief moment the outcome wavered again. But the balance had already shifted. American dive bombers found Hiryu later that afternoon, and she too was set ablaze. Silence returned to the Pacific. In a single day, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers and the experienced pilots and deck crews it could never replace. The United States lost 1 carrier, but gained something far greater: the initiative. Midway ended Japan's offensive war and forced the empire onto the defensive, retreating island by island across the Pacific. It also proved something revolutionary. Battleships no longer decided wars. No great guns exchanged fire at Midway. The decisive blows came from aircraft launched beyond the horizon, and naval warfare was changed forever. The Pacific War would continue for years, but its direction was set here, over open water, in a battle few people ever saw. And this is why history matters, because within these moments lie the choices, chances, and hesitations that shaped the world. This is the Historia Unlocked, where the past is not just remembered, it is revealed. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment.